director. He has already made a film, Wangdak Rain Boots. Lapadial. He was the assistant director on this film, and so he tries to put forward the most promising of his staff, of the staff, of the people, young people he works with, to train them. He pays sometimes for their tuition in Beijing, which is quite costly, and he really invests in Tibetan youth to be trained professionally and to be able to stand on their 2 feet. And now he says he wants to start production because he's quite successful now, even in China. So I think in terms of finance, it's okay for him. It was tough at the beginning, but now I think he can attract quite a lot of funding. And he really wants to build a Tibetan school, so to speak, and to push for a Tibetan scene, which was his plan from the beginning. It's very impressive, actually, because whatever he was saying 70 years ago, he he just keeps going.
One question?
We see many good Tibetan filmmakers who are coming from Amdo, Pema Tsedan, Sojalke, and you say all this crew. And till now, I never saw a good film from Tibetan, from Central Tibetan, Lhasa, and so. Can you tell me what is the reason why?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, and from Kham, there are very few films also from Kham area. So East, Central, and Central Tibet. Well, for Central Tibet, it's extremely tense politically. So it's called, Lhasa is seen from Beijing. Tibet is Lhasa, So attention is focused on this area. It's a good thing because when authorities and police, everyone is watching, closely monitoring Tibetans in Lhasa. It's very sad for them, but they leave other Tibetans quite alone, so they don't really, I can say, use so much attention to spy on them or to look at what they're doing thoroughly. So they have more freedom in a way. I agree, in a non-free environment, there's more freedom in Amdo than in Central Tibet. Making films is complicated, you have a 40-person staff, you need authorizations, you need funding, but you need also a lot of authorizations. And securing these authorizations, being a Tibetan, is very complicated. Even Pema Tsedan, he tried to make films in Central Tibet. So far he hasn't been able to. He wanted to, and so far he hasn't succeeded. Although he's quite famous. And I can't remember, I think it was the film The Search, but I'm not sure. Anyway, one of his, maybe Sacred Arrow, anyway, one, third or fourth film, he wanted to show it in Lhasa, but he was not even showing it, he was not granted permission. So Lhasa is, you just can't move an eyelid, It's so, making a film it's not that you don't have people there, but everyone is so afraid, giving an authorization that is new, that, opening a new path is very complicated in Lhasa and Central Tibet in general. So this is why there are some local films, very small, documentary films, a little bit, but very, very limited.
Are there moments where he has to be scared for his life? Because I did read, I wasn't sure if that's true, that he was detained twice. Is that true? Or
twice? I'm not sure. Once, yes.
Once, yes.
Yeah. Well, I talked. We talked about that. He was detained. I think it was 2016, maybe, or 15, at the airport. He was flying back from Beijing to Xining, capital of the province, Qinghai, and it looks like. We will never know, but it looks like he was not targeted because he was Pema Tsedan. It looks like. So he's a very, apart from, the one time when he's angry, but this is very unusual. Usually he's very cool and gentle, quiet. He likes watching and looking, but he doesn't talk too much, and he's very quiet. And then, so I say that it's important. So he left, from what he said, he left the, he got off the plane, and then he had to grab his bag, and then he left the airport, but then he had forgotten maybe a handbag back where he came from, where the belt is or something like that. And you're not supposed to go back. And still he had to go back to get his bag back. And he went back in, and this is where trouble began. And the bodyguards or whatever, the guards really took it very bad that he should break the law and go in, but it looks like they didn't know who he was. And then maybe the fact that he's Tibetan, but maybe not. You just come across the wrong person at the wrong time, and these guys really made a fuss. And there's no rule of law really, so they just then it just starts boiling to to some extent that you can't stop it anymore. So they put handcuffs, and then he was detained for 3 days, I think. But when the authorities knew that it was Pema Tsedan who had been arrested, I heard that the governor of Qinghai province, or Mr. Number One, came to he had to go to the hospital because he has diabetes and he couldn't take his medicine for 3 days. That was a big problem. So the head of province went to his room to apologize.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
So that's interesting because I think it was a blunder. I don't think he was. Of course, he's watched. Of course, he has to be careful. He's a public Tibetan. I think he's the only public Tibetan who travels all over the place. Yeah. I mean, Santarya as well, but Santarya is not so famous. So he is really in the limelight. He's really in the spotlight. So he's watched. That's for sure. But so far, I think it's okay.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes?
I was wondering, I think the average Tibetan here in exile does not know names of Pema Tsedan or Santarya, the average Tibetan. But what is the status of Pema Tsedan? You said he's famous, but like the average Tibetan, do they know him? Is he like a star? Do they have chance to see his movies in Amdo?
Yeah, very good point, because in our little circles he's very famous, but of course, even if you ask anyone on the street, I don't think they will know him. But in cinema circles, he's famous. Now, in art movie, I'm not talking about Tibet here, I'm talking about the cinema circles. His name is really becoming big, and because he's been to Venice a few times, and I think Venice, and of course Vancouver and everything. So he's a rising big name in Asian cinema, that's for sure, among professionals. Now, talking about the general public, the Tibetan general public, they know him, they've heard the name usually in Tibet proper, because he's quite famous there, and he has a big following of young, trendy Chinese, artists and avant-gardes and people who are a bit different and who like art and Buddhism. So you have also a fringe of the Chinese population which is different from the mainstream. So he has a big following. If he goes to present a film in Shanghai, for instance, you can see pictures. Well, it's China, so you have big population. So you have 100. Well, you used to have before COVID. You have 100 Chinese people around him. Like this, as if he were a lama. Like this. So he has this fame among Tibet lovers, because there are Tibet lovers among the young Chinese generation, cinema lovers among Chinese, and among Tibetans too, because he's a star that shines for Tibet in a way. But most Tibetans don't really like his films, I must say. The ones I talk to, because the films are quite demanding. This one is maybe the one who can reconcile him with Tibetan audience. They are not apart, but the previous films, if you've seen them, arty, black and white, 2-hour film, for some people it's too much. What does he mean? And of course, the first film was so the Silent Holy Stones. You may have screened it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about daily life, and to enjoy daily life on screen, you have to enjoy cinema at a certain level, otherwise, because especially in China, they have, they like this kung fu style action movie. Well, it's Chinese style, but kung fu style, or, a love story or whatever. Well, like most people anyway, most cinema goers. So they love him, they think highly of him. They think he represents Tibet in a new way, and most of them, as far as I know, think that he hasn't misrepresented them, and he doesn't sell Tibet, for money, or he's quite true to himself and to Tibet. That is what people gather usually, but they don't really like his films, with the exception. I'm not talking about the movie, but I'm talking about the Man on the Street. The one film which is the exception is The Sacred Arrow, which is a film about a love story between two competing villages, competing in terms of arrow shooting. And maybe you've shown it as well. Okay. And there's also love competition, one young man from one village loves and a young woman from the other village, and so it's kind of, it's very straightforward. It's nice, but it's not as deep as his other films. But it was a commission. He was asked to make this film, and by his producer, and he did it. And when he talks about his career, when he meets journalists, he never mentions that film, Sacred Arrow. He kind of forget it. But this is the film that Tibetans like. Because they understand it, it's fun. You have a competition, you have love, it's wonderful.
I think even for Switzerland, it's not the majority who enjoys like independent cinema, 2 hour long.
Nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere.
So why should Tibetans be different? Plus, for Tibetans, even in France, we have a strong cinema culture.
Yeah.
But still, action movies and everything are quite big. And we've had movies for 100 years plus, 120 years. Tibetans have had movies for, 16 years? And the reference points that they have usually is what they see on TV. So it's not exactly very subtle or, very deep. So, and are his films shown? Well, Jimpa got national release, meaning he was shown in Chinese cities, and it was also shown in cities where Tibetans live, like Chengdu or Xining, Lanzhou, and Tarlo, no, not Tarlo, so Jimpa, and this one. No, this one is going to be released. Tarlo, I think it was shown here and there, but the problem is there's no big network of cinemas in Tibetan areas. So how to touch, Tibetans in terms of cinema, usually it's through DVDs. So people copy films and make fake DVDs. So they watch his films like this on the internet and everything. But they cannot go to the cinema because usually they don't have a cinema house next to their place.
We have time for one last question. You can also ask in German. If not, can you make a prediction about the future? Do you think how will Tibetan cinema develop? Will there be new talents that will emerge, or is it just like Pema Tsedan, the few that we have seen?
That's the big question, because he's really, you can think he's a kind of a miracle because he's the one case, although Sontarya is also doing very well, but at a slower pace. La Khwaja or Lapadjel, his disciple, I would say, who made this film One Dark Rain Boots, is one of his products. And from what I can see in his crew, he has very committed young Tibetans working for him who are 25, 30 years old. They are really, moviegoers, or they watch DVDs. Sometimes they go for training to Beijing. And I think he has done the most difficult part. He has made Tibetan movie exist. Maybe what I should say is that so far he has not relied at all on state money. So he has always found funding by himself through Chinese companies, but not state-related companies. So he's been able to keep a little aside, from the official narrative of Tibet being liberated by China, etc., etc. Well, of course, quite apart from that. So but it was very hard. He really struggled very hard, and he's done the harshest, I think, establishing maybe a sort of Tibetan school. Or now, when you say Tibetan films, not everyone, but people who know cinema a little bit, they don't say what, oh yes, okay. Yes, I know, Pema Tsedan, Santarya, da da da. So, from zero, you have now maybe 12 or 14 films, which is not bad. And I think it's like a tree that grows, or branches off. So, given that he gives many chances to young Tibetans to get training, professional training during the shootings, given the fact also that these young Tibetans can apply their knowledge now, for instance, I'm thinking of the editor on this film. His brother is also sound editor on the film, and he has a company in Xining, and they make video clips, they make advertisements, so they're becoming professional, they can earn a living, they can increase their knowledge, and maybe after 3-4 years they can make a movie by themselves. It's so far so good. I think it started from zero, and this is what we have to see. It's still limited, but you have to understand how hard it was at the beginning, and because it has a faithful crew. I have attended 3 different Tibetan film shootings. I even played one scene in a film. So next time I come, it will be as an actress. Yes, just one line. So I'm just beginning my career as an actress, but who knows? But anyway, in all these films, I see the same faces. Well, you have new faces. Sometimes some of them disappear, but some. Oh, hi, how are you? So you were. So they're building their knowledge. They're making a very nice group, and. Hopefully, and there are many films that we don't get to see here because they are documentary films or not completely super, polished films, but they do make films which are interesting, I should say, and very promising. So give them a few more years. The crew is still young, but I think they are very motivated, and they have a lama. It's like a lineage, but it's a lonyeng. It's a film lineage, not a religious one. But it works like this in Tibetan culture, and I think there will be good results.
Thank you very much. It was really great to have Françoise here. Even though we are at the Tibet Film Festival, the Tibetan films and the film sets and everything around it is always very far for us. We write emails to Chinese distribution companies. We never know really what's going on, and it's like quite difficult to communicate, also to communicate directly, because we don't want to put them into any like difficult situations. So to hear like insights from Françoise, who's been to Tibet, who knows the filmmakers, has been very insightful. Thank you so much, Françoise, for coming here, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you for your festival.
Yeah, thank you.
Alors, on là. Oups, taillons, mais